Chapter 1. Early Memories. My mother's mother, Fence Oma, so called in my childhood years, was born in 1889. She seemed to be destined to live a hard life. Coming from a less fortunate family, she married into a more prosperous one. She bore 4 children in short succession: Gretel, Wally, Erich, and Ernst, the last one whose crib was a commode drawer, as space was tight. Fence Oma told me that her husband's nerves were always in poor shape, even before marriage. I can imagine when 4 little kids began to cry and scream, and he lost it. At one point, he threw a pair of scissors through the room, which got stuck in the wooden door. He eventually was committed to a mental hospital. Fence Oma was working in a factory as a weaver on a big loom. Her grandmother, already an old woman, had to take care of the kids. Mama sometimes told me that all 4 of them went to the woods with the old woman, who had just 1 tooth left in her mouth. They all collected berries and mushrooms. When break times arrived, all eyes were trained on the old woman's deep pockets in her long skirt. Out came the pieces of hardened bread crusts, on which they all sucked and chewed. Fence Oma had been a religious person, but after much praying and no relief from God, neither help from the church or her husband's family, which had always lots of money for their other grandchildren, but only a minuscule amount for their sons 4. She left religion, church, and family behind, just being a good and just person. She was endowed with strength of character. It was hard standing on her feet all day long. Her kids had to do some household chores, like peeling and cutting potatoes for supper, or washing the kitchen floor, which often was done the last minute before Fence Oma came home from work. She had to raise the 4 of them as World War I broke out, but somehow eked out a living. Greiz was the city they lived in, and on Sundays the whole family would wander through the woods, enjoying the beautiful mountainous scenery of Thuringia. The Thuringia area is in the northeasterly part of Germany. It is most famous for the castle Wartburg, where Martin Luther had sought refuge in 1521 after the Pope had excommunicated him. The Emperor Charles V had outlawed undermining Catholic doctrine with his 95 Theses. He had translated the original Greek Bible into German so everybody could read it. The kids grew up into another bad era, the Depression of 1929. In the early 30s, Gretel, the oldest, met a young man from southern Germany, the Schwabenland, Württemberg, who was visiting Greiz. They got married and resided in Heidenheim. Klaus worked at nowadays world-famous J.M. Voigt, working in the foundry. He had a friend, Jacob, also working there, introducing him to Wally, Gretel's sister. He saw her and immediately was taken by her. His words in the Schwaben slang were, "Du musst her." In other words, "This one is for me." And he got her. He got her pregnant and married her 2 weeks before the baby was born. That baby was I, being born via the help of a midwife in 1936. Eric, the 3rd sibling, followed his sisters to Heidenheim, where he fell in love, married Käthe, and worked at J.M. Voigt as well. Ernst, the last one of the four, had been a house painter that also tried his artistic abilities on canvas. He stayed with Fens Omar in Greiz. Earliest memories. One day, I was 2 years old. Mama told me that Papa, she, and I went to the countryside to visit the cloister Neresheim, an abbey. Its interior is beautiful and bright, with colorful ceiling and wall murals. Apparently, I interrupted the church service by excitedly running down the aisle, pointing up at the murals, crying out, "Mamale, look! Mamale, look!" I was fascinated by all those colors, which I already had known by name at that time. My father was musical. He played bass and his most favorite, sitar. A sitar has 30 to 40 strings strung across a soundboard. You can rest it on a table when played or on your knees. My father held it on his knees and yodeled, while Eric played the clarinet and a friend a guitar. They were a little entertaining band. I only have one memory of my father when I was close to 3 years old. I rode on his back as he pretended to be a horsey on his hands and knees, galloping around the big table in the living room. I would never see him again.